Could Ukraine take legal action against America to force them to support them in their campaign against Russia? Also, when is a treaty not a treaty? What's a guarantee and what's an assurance? Well, all these and more will be answered in this video, assuming I can remember. But what's all this about? Well, you've probably seen the Zelensky-Trump-Vance meeting the other day. There's lots of people commenting about that. Dan's done some rather excellent videos, including one analysing the body language, which was very interesting. But I'm not going to get into the politics too much, because first of all, as you know, I don't really do that on this channel. But also there are some pragmatic and practical reasons that I can't get into, that I can't really be seen to get too opinionated about this subject. But I can talk in general terms, and I'd like to take you back to 1994. So what's happened? Well, the former Soviet Union has collapsed, and Ukraine now finds it's regained its independence. But it's also sat on the third largest stock of nuclear weapons in the world. So what do you do about those? Obviously, Russia was not particularly happy about it. They did it on sort of non-proliferation grounds. Oh, you don't really need them now, we're all friends, etc. But Ukraine was rather suspicious. I wonder why. But they tried to agree this between themselves, and that just wasn't happening. So the United States steps in and says, right, we will come in and we will act as an honest broker here. And the deal they did was something called the Budapest Memorandum. And what that said is, okay, Ukraine, you will give up your nuclear weapons. But in return for that, and there are a few factors, not just the defence factor, but nuclear weapons are, worth a lot of money. Even if you want to sort of, swords to ploughshares and just refine the uranium, they were very expensive things. So they said, here's the deal. If you give up your nuclear weapons, we will give you a security assurance. We will say, you don't need your nuclear weapons, because if anything happens to you, if Russia tries to do anything, we will take care of it. Also, with regards to the sort of pure monetary thing, this is a rather interesting one. Where did Ukraine sell its nuclear weapons to? They actually gave them, as part of the agreement, they gave them to Russia. And in exchange for this rather valuable plutonium, Russia agreed effectively to pick up the tab for Ukraine's gas bill. It was like, okay, we will provide you with gas in exchange for this rather valuable commodity. But what did the memorandum actually say? It's because this came back to haunt people. It said basically that, first of all, Ukraine was defined by the extant border at the time. The territorial integrity of Ukraine was a particular border, and Ukraine insisted on that. And that basically means Ukraine, keeps Crimea and the Donbass. It was, so that was the boundary. And it basically said that if Russia breached that boundary, invaded in any way, did anything, then America would intervene. Now, in what way would they intervene? They said they would provide financial and military assistance, but they wouldn't actually put troops on the ground. Now, here's the thing. Was this a security guarantee, or was this a security assurance? Because that makes a lot of difference when it comes to enforceability. Well, certainly in theory anyway. Now, what's interesting is, in English it says assurance. However, in Ukrainian, it says guarantee. Similarly, it actually says guarantee in the Russian copy, because basically they wrote a copy. When they lodged these in like loads of different languages, and they said, well, they're all authentic originals. It's not like here's the English copy and everything else is a rough translation. It said these are, as far as we're concerned, this is the same agreement, but we've just so each copy is as valid as the other, and the idea is it's all the same language. However, there's a lot of politics in this, obviously, because Ukraine, to sell it to their own people, they said this needs to be a security guarantee, so they used the word guarantee. Russia also agreed to the word guarantee going in there. And the argument was that in both Russian and Ukraine, guarantee and assurance are synonyms. Now, some linguistic experts have said, no, they're not, and there were other words they could have used. But it was a deliberate fudge, even at the time, this ambiguity of language. But when it comes to the English version, it says assurance. Now, so that was the memorandum. Who else joined in with this? Well, later on, because, France and the UK, we were also pushing for, we don't really want more nuclear arms in the world and the risk of a sort of border conflict. And there's all the non-proliferation treaties. So how about Ukraine? You give these up, you sign the non-proliferation treaty as well. But Ukraine turned around and said, well, it's all right for you to say that, but don't know it's you giving up your nuclear weapons, France and the UK. So we said, okay, fair point, we will also join in on this. So here's the deal, you give up your nuclear weapons and we will also agree that we will provide, in the event of a breach of the memorandum, we will provide military support. And that included financial support, basically everything except putting troops on the ground in combat, because I think it's a bit of an open secret that we have military observers there. Because, it makes sense, just from an intelligence gathering point of view, go over there, send some of our guys over and keep an eye on what's happening and how modern warfare works. I mean, we're very platform dependent in this country. The idea that we have like aircraft carriers, we have the sort of Challenger 3 tank, we have the Eurofighter. But now we're seeing like modern drone warfare is big platform-based warfare. Is when you can send a $500 drone to blow up a $4 million tank, it changes the game plan a bit. But we've got people over there. But the idea is we are obliged, if Russia did anything, we are obliged to provide financial and military support. That was the deal we signed up to. And indeed, that is what we have been doing. So I know people are saying, oh, we're sending all this money, we're sending all this kit. Why are we doing that? We don't have a dog in the fight. It's not our thing. Well, it's actually, we promised to do this in exchange for Ukraine giving up their nuclear weapons. Now, this agreement was lodged with the United Nations. It was actually lodged as a treaty. And the thing is, if it's a treaty, it is theoretically enforceable. Now, of course, when it comes to international law, enforceability, realistically, how do you do that? I mean, in theory, the United Nations can sort of say you are in breach of something, and therefore, we'll do sanctions against you, up to and including taking military action. But I can't see anybody doing that against the US. There's also financial sanctions. Theoretically, you've got the International Court of Justice. But the argument is that on America's side, they're saying, no, this was just an assurance. This was not a guarantee. So yes, a guarantee might be enforceable, but an assurance isn't, and basically you shouldn't have trusted us. Now most people, I think, are agreeing that the Budapest Memorandum, technically speaking there's 4 of them, but I know they keep saying memorandum, and I think that's probably because they can't decide whether it should be memoranda or memorandums. Both are correct apparently. But that's where we are, and that's why we've been embroiled. And other countries also signed up on it, because the idea was, should Ukraine join NATO? People were saying, well, joining NATO will annoy the Russians, so how about, instead of that, you're not officially in NATO, but we'll also give you these assurances. Lots of countries sort of, bordering with Russia. To get into the history of this, and again, not the politics, one thing a very interesting analysis of the Russian situation is, yes, obviously there's the sort of appeal to national pride and things like that. And, obviously it's a bit of a kleptocracy over there, so there's just the money grabbing. It's like, there's loads of minerals here, let's get in and take them. But from a sort of strategic point of view, Russia's always been very paranoid about being invaded, perhaps understandably so. And conventionally there are considered to be 9 invasion routes into Russia. And after the fall of the Soviet Union and they lost all the satellite states, they basically lost control over all those entrance routes. And slowly over time they've been trying to get them back, like, annexing Georgia again, because that takes care of one of them, and some of the, various ones in the stands. Poland's got sort of 2 of the traditional invasion routes, so that's why they've been eyeing Poland. And also when it comes to the Crimea, that's considered to be an invasion route, but more importantly, Sevastopol is the only port that can support the Russian fleet all year round, because all their northern ports, if it's a bad winter, they ice up and they can't get anything in or out. So you've got to, when analysing these situations, sometimes the motivations, it's like, why are they doing this? But you just not sort of need to look into the history of it. But that's the situation. So it's been lodged with the United Nations as a treaty, but America's argument is, no, it's an assurance, and assurances are basically not enforceable. They're a bit like just, we've done this on a handshake, but it's not a contract. It's very similar to sort of bog standard contractual law, where you've got to have offer, acceptance, consideration, but also the intention to create legal relations. So if you say to your kid, I'll give you a £5 to mow the lawn, well, then the kid does it. Well, that's offer and acceptance and consideration. But then can your child sue you if they mow the lawn and then you don't pay? Any kids in that situation, give me a call, because I think you can. But the argument is, no, so things like that, there's no intention to create legal relations. And the argument here is that that's the same with this memorandum. And so what can Ukraine do about it? Well, one thing they can do is, as part of the memorandum, they agreed to sign up to the non-proliferation treaty, but anybody can exit that on 6 months' notice. So they could say, right, well, we'll just redevelop nuclear weapons then. You know, we've got the technology, we've got a huge nuclear processing plant that you may have heard of at the top of the country, and it may even be there'd be some allies in the world who, you know, or some, even if not allies, people who do it on a financial basis and provide them with the relevant materials. They can also now apply to join NATO, because that was also one in the memorandum. Now, in the memorandum, it didn't explicitly rule out joining NATO. That was a bit of a sticking point, but there was always an understanding. And again, so it goes both ways, in the same way that America is arguing we never promised to do this, or we only implied that we'd do it, but you can't force it, you know, you can't enforce this. It's arguably the same with the NATO thing. Well, yes, we sort of intimated that we would not join NATO, but now you've thrown that out the window. All bets are off, so we can join up to NATO. But like I say, in reality, how would you enforce this? Well, you could get a ruling from the ICJ, but that'd be a piece of paper saying, congratulations, you're right. And that's worth about as much as getting a county court judgment. It's like, you know, you get plenty, God, it's very noisy around here. You get a county court judgment, you know, good luck turning that into actual cash. And it's a similar thing with this. You could get your ICJ ruling, arguably a lot of the rulings, because, you know, they're only sort of, you know, indicative, they're not binding. So that's, you know, yeah, you're in the right, but so what? Or you could go to the UN and say, well, you know, basically this is all in breach. So you need to do some, you need to put sanctions on America until they start abiding by their obligations and providing us with the military equipment and the military support and the financial support. But as we've seen, the Trump administration have, you know, they seem to be ahead of the game on that, and they're going, okay, we'll just pull out of the United Nations then. So there you go. But I just thought you might find that interesting, because it's all about interpretation, and especially when you've got, you know, multilateral agreements in different languages. I mean, quite often you'll get that in international contracts and things, and agreements that say this is the authentic one in this language, and then all others are just mere translations. But in this case, they put in all three as being on equal footing, even though the language is, you know, not identical in each one, but that was a deliberate political fudge at the time to try and sell the deal. But yeah, so the argument is that if we call this a treaty, then America is in breach of their treaty obligations. If we call this an assurance, then they're not. But in practical terms, whatever you call it, realistically, how can you force a country with, like, you know, 15 aircraft carrier groups to do anything? You know, I mean, ironically, international law is a bit like the freedom on the land arguments. I mean, basically, unless you consent to it to being binding on you, it doesn't really count. But there you go. As always, hope you found that vaguely interesting, vaguely accurate, vaguely informative. Where am I today? I'm at Ale and Cakes Mine again, or Cake and Ales Mine, sometimes it's seen as. That's an old phrase, you know, everything's coming up, ale and cakes, meaning everything's going really, really well. This is quite a pretty spot. So I just thought I'd come here, notwithstanding all the motorcycle crowd bombing around. But yeah, I'll try and get an artistic shot of the engine house reflected in the lake. See what you know. Oh dear, I think Stanley Kubrick's job is safe, isn't it?